Microsoft's done with Sony's crap. Ooh, friends, we're hitting high times in the regulatory battles for Microsoft trying to buy Activision, trying to close that deal, and late last night, Microsoft came out swinging, and it sounds like, honestly, the rumors are true. Now, what rumors are those, Brad? They're the rumors that over the weekend, Microsoft was expected to be meeting with Sony to try to get them to take the $10, I'm sure they'd love a $10 deal, the 10-year deal for Call of Duty on that platform. And from what it sounds like, Microsoft was actually meeting with companies over the weekend, but Sony, I don't think, was one of them. So let's just kind of dive into what the news was late last night and sort of bleeding over into this morning. So Phil Spencer tweeted out this information. He said, Microsoft has entered into a 10-year commitment to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo. That's super interesting in its own regard. Following the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard/King, Microsoft is committed to help bring more games to more people, however they choose to play. Phil Spencer followed that up by tweeting, I am pleased to confirm that Microsoft has committed to continue to offer Call of Duty on Steam simultaneously to Xbox after we close the merger with Activision Blizzard/King. 10-year deals, that is the information we had been hearing time and time again, that Microsoft was trying to lock down 10-year deals, and from what it sounds like, that is 100% factual, and not that there was too much around that, because Microsoft had actually come out and said that pretty publicly itself. But the real super interesting one there is obviously Nintendo. The Switch here is sort of the oddball outlier where Call of Duty isn't, it's not a thing. And so Microsoft very clearly coming out and saying, look, we will bring Call of Duty to the Switch. Or I should say, I need to clarify that. Actually, Microsoft says we'll bring it to Nintendo, not necessarily the Switch. I think that is a key differentiator here, because Microsoft, like, let's just imagine they do close on June 30th, as they sort of hope that they'll be able to do. They're not going to be bringing it to Switch right away. More than likely, they're going to probably try to do a cloud gaming thing. They might try to go natively, but if they are going to go natively, my bet would be on Switch v Next, meaning the next iteration of Switch is where Microsoft would try to do this. Now, the other interesting part here is obviously Steam. Microsoft come out saying, like, look, Steam, we're going to keep doing what we've done for 10 years. And Steam was probably like, great. And then just signed right on the dotted line. I don't even know if there was an actual physical commitment or like a legal commitment. Those details are still coming out. But either way, Microsoft is saying, look, we'll bring Call of Duty to Nintendo. That's going to come at great expense. Now, granted, they probably think they can make some money. We don't truly know how they're going to bring it to it. Is it the mobile iteration? Is it the streaming iteration? Or is it a true native port? We will find out maybe in the future if the deal actually closes. Now, the other super interesting thing here is Microsoft, well, they're just officially done with Sony's crap. This is Brad Smith, and every time he tweets something, I get tagged in a bunch of stuff because people think I am Brad Smith. I can assure you, I am not the chief legal counsel for Microsoft. That would be really awkward if it was. Either way, he tweeted out along the same lines, but he's really going right after Sony. He says, our acquisition will bring Call of Duty to more gamers and more platforms than ever before. That's good for competition and good for consumers. Thank you, Nintendo, calling them out. And any day Sony wants to sit down and talk, we'll be happy to hammer out a 10-year deal for PlayStation as well. Any time that Sony wants to sit down and talk, my friends. So very clearly, Sony is, as we all knew, was the holdout in this entire situation, and Microsoft's just done. It's very clear that they have tried and tried again, and I suspect that they're actually bringing this information to Washington, D.C. Be like, look, we are trying to be good stewards of this acquisition. We are very clearly, obviously know that this is a massive deal and it has to jump through a bunch of hurdles, and that's why they went to Nintendo, that's why they went to Valve, and that's why Sony just won't budge. Sony is very clearly dug their heels in and is going to do everything in its power to be able to stop Microsoft from closing this deal. Now, what I think is happening is Microsoft, we know that the FTC is kind of on the cusp of issuing their ruling, although there's information that leaked out from the New York Post, and there's a previous video on the channel about how maybe it's not so clear cut and that maybe the FTC is actually leaning towards approving this deal. So we'll have to wait and see. But the reason why I bring all this up is that this tweet from Microsoft's global head of communications says, waking up this morning in DC. Why in the world would Microsoft be in DC this morning at this time of the year on this fairly fond weather day? We all know the exact reason. This was very clearly a coordinated and timed release on Microsoft's effort before they probably are likely going to go meet with the FTC to try to sway public opinion, especially for anybody who's on a Switch. And so they dropped all this information late last night, especially Eastern time. You can see it's nearly midnight. It's after 11 p.m. That's past my bedtime. Phil Spencer coming out and doing all this, Brad Smith coming out and doing all this. Very clearly, they are laying the foundation before they have a conversation with Mr. and Mrs. FTC to try to see if they can avert a deal where they get sued and then this thing gets really drug out. I suspect that Microsoft is a little bit back on their heels right now, saying like, look, we will do whatever it is you ask of us to get this deal closed because we are such believers in what we are doing. Not to mention that whole App Store thing going on inside with the Apples and the Googles. We all know what's going on over there. And so Microsoft is laying the foundation here. So the fact that Sony is the one holding out at the end of the day, I don't think this is surprising to too many people that Sony is looking at this going, Now, the super interesting and hilarious thought is, what happens if all of a sudden the FTC is like, yeah, bro, we're just going to approve this as is. Sony and Nintendo, oh, well, Sony, whatever, good luck. Nintendo, great. Steam, great. Microsoft, what? Like, seriously, what would happen if the FTC is like, okay, you don't have to have an agreement with Sony. And then Sony just completely screwed the pooch. And by saying, by not fighting this, all of a sudden, they don't have a 10-year deal like the other platforms. That would be the true monkey paw situation where Sony tried to hold out and then all of a sudden Microsoft would be like, well, sorry, bro, we're just going to, put the exclusive stuff on Nintendo, PC, and Switch. And, and then they would have to deal with that, at least in the US. Now, that would be a spicy meatball, if that were to truly play out. So here we are with Microsoft headed to Washington, D.C., headed to D.C. to put up their fight. And I suspect that this is their probably last chance. Maybe they have to come with concessions or things that I assume that the FTC went with them with an initial bit of concern. Now they are coming back to address them in person this morning in Washington, D.C. And then that will probably be the final hearing, I'm guessing, internally, before the ruling by the FTC is formally released, and then Microsoft has to go do whatever or not whatever, or specifically, potentially, and I don't think we're quite there yet, maybe the FTC has fully decided, and now they're going to learn the ruling before it goes public, so maybe we are on the cusp, potentially, of learning what the FTC is going to require. All that being said, if that were the case that it was truly already locked down, I don't think we would necessarily see these tweets from Phil Spencer and their chief legal counsel and their head of global stuff. So, there you go. That is what's happening with the latest bit of the Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard, King wrap-up. So, make sure to keep it subscribed here because the only BS on this channel is me.